The Velthari Dominion had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. Their empire spread across 40,000 star systems. Their warships numbered in the millions. Their name alone made entire civilizations surrender without a fight. They were the masters of the galaxy, and they knew it. High Arbiter Keth Voran stood before the great window of his throne room, watching the endless streams of ships that moved through the space around his capital world. He was tall for a Velthari, his gray skin marked with the golden tattoos of his royal bloodline. His 4 eyes gleamed with ambition. He had taken power just 3 cycles ago, and already he was planning something that no High Arbiter had dared to do in 10,000 years. He was going to open the Forbidden Zone. Every Velthari child learned about the Forbidden Zone. It was a region of space at the edge of the Dominion, marked on every star chart with a simple word: forbidden. No explanation, no details, just an ancient law passed down from the founders themselves. The founders were the mysterious beings who had given the Velthari civilization. They had appeared from the void millions of years ago, taught the primitive Velthari how to build starships and weapons, and then vanished. Before they left, they gave one final command. It was carved into the walls of every temple, written in every holy book, and burned into the memory of every Velthari who ever lived. The space beyond the veil belongs to the Deathworlders. Do not enter. Do not contact. Do not provoke. There is no victory there. Only extinction. Keth Voran thought this was nonsense. He turned away from the window and looked at his advisors. They were gathered around a holographic display that showed the Forbidden Zone. It was a large region of space, hundreds of star systems, all unexplored. Our scanners have detected massive deposits of rare minerals in those systems, said Admiral Uthral, his most trusted military commander. Enough to fuel our fleets for 1,000 years, and we have avoided this treasure for 10,000 years because of old stories, Keth Voran said. His voice was filled with disgust. The founders were powerful, but they were not gods. They were beings of flesh and blood, and they died like all beings die. Their warnings are nothing but ancient superstition. One of his advisors, an old priest named Vethal, stepped forward. His body was bent with age, and his eyes were clouded. High Arbiter, I beg you to reconsider. The founders knew things we cannot understand. The Deathworlders do not exist, Keth Voran interrupted. Show me one piece of evidence. Show me one ship, one signal, one trace of these so-called Deathworlders. You cannot, because there is nothing there. The Forbidden Zone is empty, and we have been fools to avoid it. The old priest lowered his head. He knew better than to argue with the High Arbiter. Keth Voran turned to Admiral Uthral. You will take a fleet of 200 warships and cross into the Forbidden Zone. Scan everything. Map everything. Find out what resources are there, and if you encounter any resistance. He smiled, showing his sharp teeth. Remind them who rules this galaxy. End quote. Admiral Uthral saluted. It will be done. High Arbiter. 3 weeks later, the fleet crossed the boundary into the Forbidden Zone. Admiral Uthral stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching the stars slide past on the view screen. His crew was nervous. Even he felt a small knot of fear in his stomach. But he pushed it down. He was a Velthari warrior. He did not believe in ghost stories. The fleet spread out across the Forbidden Zone, scanning system after system. They found nothing. Empty planets. Dead moons. Asteroid fields rich with minerals. Just as the scanners had promised, but no ships, no cities, no signs of any civilization. Days passed. Then weeks. The crew began to relax. Some of them even laughed about their earlier fears. The Forbidden Zone was just empty space, nothing more. The founders had been wrong, or perhaps they had lied to keep the Velthari away from these resources for their own reasons. Admiral Uthral sent a message back to the High Arbiter. The Forbidden Zone is clear. No hostile presence detected. Recommend immediate colonization. Admiral. Recommend immediate colonization. Kethvorin received the message with great satisfaction. He ordered colony ships to be prepared. He would claim this territory for the Dominion, and his name would be remembered forever as the ruler who finally conquered the fear that had held his people back for millennia. The fleet was preparing to return home when it happened. A signal appeared on every communication device in the fleet. It cut through their encryption like it was nothing. It bypassed their security systems, as if they did not exist. And when it played, every Velthari who heard it felt their blood turn cold. The message was in perfect Velthari. Not just the language, but the exact dialect spoken in the capital. The accent was flawless. The pronunciation was perfect. Whoever sent this message knew the Velthari better than they knew themselves. You were warned. Admiral Rethral stood frozen on his bridge, staring at the communication console. You have 30 cycles to leave. The crew looked at each other with wide eyes. Some of them were trembling. There will be no second warning. The message ended. Silence filled the bridge. Admiral Uthral tried to trace the signal's origin. His technicians worked frantically, running every scan they had, but they found nothing. The signal had come from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. It was impossible, and yet it had happened. He sent an urgent message to the High Arbiter, reporting what had occurred. Then, he waited for orders. Back on the capital world, Kethvorin listened to the message. For a moment, just one moment, he felt afraid. Something about that voice, so calm and cold, made him want to order the fleet home immediately. But then his pride took over. He was the High Arbiter of the Velthari Dominion. He ruled 40,000 star systems. He commanded millions of warships. He would not run from a voice in the dark. Someone is trying to scare us, he said to his advisors. Some primitive species hiding in the shadows, hoping we will flee from their tricks. We will not. We will find them, and we will crush them. He gave new orders to Admiral Dethral. The fleet would not retreat. Instead, reinforcements would be sent. The Third Conquest Armada, 12,000 of the most powerful warships in the Dominion, would cross into the Forbidden Zone and find the source of that transmission. The Velthari would not be intimidated. They would not be afraid. They were the masters of the galaxy, and no one would tell them where they could or could not go. In the darkness of space, far beyond the reach of Velthari sensors, something watched the fleet prepare its reinforcements. Something ancient. Something patient. Something that had been waiting for this moment for a very, very long time. The Terrans had given their warning. It had been ignored. Now they would teach the Velthari why their ancestors had been so afraid. The Third Conquest Armada was the pride of the Velthari Dominion. 12,000 warships, each one capable of destroying a planet. They had crushed rebellions, conquered empires, and brought entire species to their knees. No force in the known galaxy could stand against them. Admiral Uthral watched from his flagship as the Armada crossed into the Forbidden Zone. The sight filled him with confidence. Whatever had sent that warning message would soon learn the price of threatening the Dominion. High Arbiter Kethvorin had given him simple orders. Find the source of the transmission. Destroy it. Make an example that would echo across the stars. The Velthari did not tolerate defiance. The Armada spread out across the Forbidden Zone in a search pattern. Thousands of ships scanning, thousands of systems, looking for any sign of the mysterious enemy. For days, they found nothing but empty space and dead worlds. Then they began finding the ruins. On a barren moon orbiting a gas giant, a scouting party discovered the remains of an ancient city. The buildings had been reduced to rubble. The streets were filled with dust and silence, but on the walls that still stood, they found writing, symbols carved into stone, preserved for millions of years. The Velthari translators worked on the symbols for hours. When they finally decoded the message, a cold fear spread through the scouting party. Do not wake them. They found similar ruins on other worlds, different species, different languages, different civilizations. But the message was always the same. Some had carved it into mountains, others had built monuments with the warning written in letters a kilometer tall. One species had encoded the message in their very genes, passing it down through countless generations. Do not wake them. Do not disturb the Deathworlders. Turn back. Leave this place. They cannot be defeated. Admiral Whiterall reported the findings to the High Arbiter. Keth Voran dismissed them with contempt. Ancient failures, he said. Weak species who could not defend themselves. We are not like them. We are Velthari. The search continued. 3 weeks into the mission, a scout squadron discovered something interesting. A small blue and green world orbiting a yellow star. The planet was beautiful, covered with oceans and forests and clouds, and it was broadcasting signals. Primitive electromagnetic transmissions filled the space around the planet. Radio waves. Television signals. The chatter of a civilization that had barely discovered space travel. The scout commander, a young officer named Kethal who was eager to prove himself, smiled at the readings. Primitives, he said to his crew. This must be where the warning came from. Some backwater species trying to scare us with tricks. He ordered his squadron of 50 ships to descend toward the planet. They would scan the surface, assess the threat level, and report back to the Admiral. If these primitives had truly threatened the Dominion, they would be punished. The ships entered the planet's atmosphere. Below them, cities sparkled with lights. Roads connected settlements across continents. The natives had built a civilization, but it was nothing compared to Velthari technology. Their ships were primitive chemical rockets. Their weapons were projectile-based. They posed no threat. Kethal was about to order a full scan when his sensor officer screamed. Ships appearing all around us. Kethal looked at the view screen and felt his heart stop. One moment, the space above them had been empty. The next moment, there were ships everywhere. They had appeared from nothing, materializing out of empty space. Like ghosts, the ships were smaller than Velthari cruisers. But their design was unlike anything Kethal had ever seen. Sharp angles, dark metal, no visible engines. They moved with a grace that seemed to mock the laws of physics. Open fire, Kethal shouted. His ships fired. Plasma bolts and energy beams streaked toward the enemy vessels. But the enemy ships moved faster than the weapons could track. They dodged and weaved through the barrage as if they knew where every shot would go before it was fired. Then they fired back. The first shot hit Kethal's ship directly in the engine section. But this was no plasma bolt, no energy beam. The weapon passed through the shields, as if they did not exist. It passed through the armor, as if it was made of paper. The entire engine room simply vanished, converted into particles that scattered into the void. The battle lasted 4.7 seconds. That was how long it took for 50 Velthari warships to be reduced to floating debris. Not one enemy ship was scratched. Not one Velthari escaped. Kethal's last thought, as his bridge exploded around him, was that the old warnings had been right. They should never have come here. The main armada received the distress signal, followed by silence. Admiral Whiterall immediately ordered all ships to converge on the location. Whatever had destroyed the scouts would face the full might of the Third Conquest Armada. Before the fleet could move, a new transmission arrived. It was a data file, sent directly to the Admiral's personal console. It bypassed every security system on the ship. When Yithral opened it, his 4 eyes went wide with horror. The file contained complete schematics of every ship in his fleet, every weapon system, every shield frequency, every structural weakness, every communication code, information that should have been impossible for any outsider to possess. Attached to the file was a message. We know everything about you. You know nothing about us. This is your final opportunity. Leave our space now, and we will consider this matter settled. Stay, and you will share the fate of your scouts. Admiral Yithral stared at the message for a long time. Part of him wanted to retreat. Part of him knew that this enemy was unlike anything the Dominion had ever faced. But he had his orders, and he was afraid of what Keth Voran would do to him if he returned in failure. He sent a message to the High Arbiter, explaining what had happened and requesting guidance. Keth Voran's response came within the hour. The High Arbiter was beyond rage. His pride had been wounded. His authority had been challenged. And worst of all, he was afraid. But he would never admit that fear. Instead, he transformed it into fury. "I do not care what weapons they have," Keth Varan's message said. "I do not care how they hide. You have 12,000 ships. You will find that blue planet, and you will burn it until nothing remains but ash and memory. Show these primitives what happens when they threaten the Dominion." Admiral Uthral read the orders with a sinking feeling in his stomach. He knew this was wrong. Every instinct told him to retreat. But he was a loyal officer. He had served the Dominion his entire life. He gave the order. The Third Conquest Armada set course for the blue planet. Far away, in the darkness between stars, the Terrans watched the fleet approach their homeworld. They had given warnings. They had shown mercy. They had offered a chance to retreat. The Velthari had chosen war instead. In command centers hidden deep beneath the Earth's surface, officers began activating systems that had been dormant for centuries. Defense platforms powered up, fleets that had been invisible to all sensors began to move. And across 100 colony worlds, billions of humans received the same message. Earth is under threat. The wolves are awakening. The galaxy was about to learn why the founders had been so afraid of the Deathworlders. Why every civilization that had encountered them had left warnings carved in stone. Why the name Terra was spoken only in whispers by those who knew the old stories. The Velthari were coming to destroy Earth. They had no idea what was waiting for them. The Third Conquest Armada dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system. 12,000 warships arranged themselves in perfect battle formation. Their weapons were charged. Their shields were at maximum power. Their crews stood ready at their stations. Admiral Wythral looked at the view screen and saw the blue planet floating in the distance. Earth, the natives called it. Such a small world. Such a fragile-looking place. Soon it would be nothing but a burned rock orbiting a yellow star. "Scan for enemy forces," he ordered. The sensor officers worked their consoles. Seconds passed. Then one of them looked up with confusion on his face. "Admiral, I am detecting only 47 ships defending the planet." Yithral blinked. 47? "Are you certain?" "Yes, Admiral. 47 vessels in orbit around the third planet. No other ships detected in the system." A smile spread across Withral's face. He had been worried for nothing. The scouts had been caught by surprise. That was all. In a straight fight, with 12,000 ships against 47, the outcome was certain. All ships advanced toward the planet, weapons free upon engagement range. The Armada moved forward like a wave of death. Thousands of ships, bristling with weapons, ready to reduce Earth to ash. The Velthari crews felt their confidence return. This would not be a battle. It would be an execution. The 47 Terran ships did not retreat. They did not call for reinforcements. They simply held their position and waited. When the Armada reached engagement range, Admiral Withral gave the order. "All ships, open fire." 12,000 warships fired at once. The space between the fleets filled with plasma bolts, energy beams, and missiles. It was the most powerful barrage in Velthari history, enough firepower to crack a planet in half. None of it hit. The Terran ships moved in ways that should have been impossible. They did not just dodge. They seemed to know where every shot would go before it was fired. They slipped through the barrage like water through fingers, untouched by a single weapon. Then they attacked. Uthral had seen the recordings from the scout squadron. He had prepared himself for what was coming. But nothing could have truly prepared him for the reality. The Terran weapons did not care about Velthari shields. They passed through them, without slowing down. The first volley destroyed 200 ships. In the blink of an eye, the second volley destroyed 300 more. The third, fourth, and fifth volleys came so fast that the Velthari could not even count their losses. "Return fire," Ithral screamed. "All ships, concentrate fire on the nearest enemy vessel." 1,000 ships focused their weapons on a single Terran ship. The combined firepower could have destroyed a small moon. But the Terran ship was not there when the shots arrived. It had moved, appearing behind the Velthari formation, and its weapons tore through a dozen cruisers before anyone could react. The battle had become a slaughter. Velthari ships exploded by the hundreds. Their formations broke apart as captains tried desperately to escape, but there was no escape. The Terran ships were everywhere, appearing and disappearing, striking from angles that seemed impossible. Admiral Uthral watched the destruction on his view screen with horror. His armada, the pride of the Dominion, was being torn apart by 47 ships. It was not a battle. It was not even a massacre. It was something worse. It was proof that everything the Velthari believed about themselves was a lie. They were not the masters of the galaxy. They were children playing with toys. 11 minutes after the battle began, it was over. 11,847 Velthari ships had been destroyed. The remaining 153 were damaged and drifting, their weapons offline, their engines dead. Admiral Dothral sat in his command chair, staring at the view screen. His flagship was one of the survivors, though he did not know why. Around him, his bridge crew wept openly. Some prayed to gods they had never believed in before. A transmission appeared on every screen, in every surviving ship. A human face looked at them. It was not angry. It was not triumphant. It was simply calm, cold, patient. We are the Terrans. We are the Deathworlders your ancestors feared. The voice spoke perfect Velthari, just like the warning message. But now, Ithral understood that this was not a trick. It was a demonstration of power. The Terrans could speak any language, access any system, destroy any fleet. They had been watching the Velthari for thousands of years, learning everything about them while remaining invisible. For 10,000 years, we watched you from the shadows. We waited to see if you would grow wise, if you would learn to live in peace with other species, if you would become worthy neighbors in this galaxy. The face on the screen showed no emotion, no hatred, no satisfaction. Just cold, absolute certainty. You did not. Your fleet attacked our homeworld. Your ruler ordered the death of 8 billion civilians. Our children, our families, our future. Uthral felt sick. 8 billion. He had known Earth was populated, but he had never thought about the number. 8 billion living beings that Kethvaran had ordered him to kill. We do not forgive. The Terran's eyes seemed to look directly at Uthral, though that was impossible. We do not forget. The surviving ships trembled as something massive moved past them. Uthral looked at the view screen and saw Terran reinforcements arriving. Not 47 ships this time. Hundreds, thousands. They appeared from nowhere, filling the space around the shattered armada. And we are coming. The transmission ended. For a long moment, nothing happened. The surviving Velthari ships drifted among the debris of their fallen comrades, surrounded by an enemy fleet that could destroy them in seconds. Then, without a word, the Terran ships moved aside. They opened a path back toward Dominion space. A clear message. Go home. Tell everyone what happened here. Admiral Wythral understood. The Terrans wanted witnesses. They wanted the Dominion to know exactly what was coming for them. They wanted Kethvaran to spend every remaining moment of his life in fear. All surviving ships, Wythral said quietly. Retreat to Dominion space. Maximum speed. The 153 broken ships limped toward home. Behind them, the Terran fleet held position around Earth, patient and silent. The news of the massacre spread faster than the surviving ships could travel. Communication relays carried the story across the Dominion. Recordings of the battle were shared on every network. The images of Velthari ships exploding by the thousands played on screens in every city on every world. The subject species of the Dominion watched with new eyes. The Krix, the Voral, the Tharn. Species that had served the Velthari for millennia, believing they had no choice. Now, they saw the truth. The Velthari could be beaten, the Masters could bleed, and somewhere in the dark between stars, Terran ships began to move. Not toward Earth, toward the Dominion, toward Kethvaran, toward a reckoning that had been 10,000 years in the making. The galaxy would never be the same. The Dominion was dying. Everyone could feel it. In the weeks following the Battle of Sol, fear spread through the Empire like a disease. The recordings played on every screen. 12,000 ships destroyed in 11 minutes. The mightiest armada in Velthari history, reduced to debris by 47 vessels. The numbers did not seem real, but the evidence was impossible to deny. High Arbiter Keth Varan retreated to his palace on the capital world and refused to see anyone. He had stopped eating. He had stopped sleeping. He spent his days staring at star charts, watching for the attack that he knew was coming. But the Terrans did not attack, not in the way Keth Varan expected. Instead, they began to appear. A Velthari military base on the frontier reported a contact. A single Terran ship had decloaked near their orbital station, held position for exactly 30 seconds, and then vanished. No weapons fired. No communication sent, just watching. The next day, the same thing happened at another base. Then another. Then a dozen more. Terran ships appeared throughout Dominion space, watching military installations, scanning defense platforms, observing fleet movements. They never attacked. They never spoke. They just watched. The psychological effect was devastating. Commanders began seeing enemies that were not there. Captains fired on shadows. Crews refused to sleep, afraid that they would wake to find Terran ships surrounding them. The Dominion's military, once the most disciplined force in the galaxy, began to crack. Then the assassinations started. Governor Vethkan had been one of the strongest supporters of the invasion. He had given speeches calling for the destruction of the Deathworlders. He had donated millions to fund the Third Conquest Armada. He lived in a fortress surrounded by guards, protected by the most advanced security systems the Dominion could build. They found his body in his sealed bedroom. There was no sign of forced entry. No evidence of any weapon. No recording of anyone entering or leaving. He was simply dead, his face frozen in an expression of absolute terror. A message was found on his personal console, written in perfect Velthari. "You funded the attack on our world. You called for the death of our children. We remember." 2 days later, Admiral Kethal vanished from his own bridge. His crew reported that he had been giving orders one moment, and the next moment, his chair was empty. The ship's sensors showed nothing. No teleportation signature, no intruder alert. He was simply gone. The weapons designer who had built the Armada's main cannons died when his research station exploded. The investigation showed that every safety system had been disabled from the inside, but there was no record of anyone accessing the systems. One by one, everyone connected to the attack on Earth began to die. Politicians, officers, scientists, engineers. No matter where they hid, no matter how many guards protected them, death found them. And with each death came a message. We remember. Fear turned to panic. Those who had supported the invasion began to flee, abandoning their posts, hiding in the darkest corners of the Dominion. But there was no place dark enough to hide from the Terrans. Then the rebellions began. The Krix were the first. They were an insectoid species that had served the Velthari for 3,000 years. Their worlds had been stripped of resources. Their people had been used as slave labor. They had accepted their fate because they believed the Dominion was too powerful to resist. Now they knew better. The Krix attacked the Velthari garrison on their homeworld. The fighting was brutal but short. Within days, the Krix had won their freedom. The Velthari High Command ordered a punitive fleet to crush the rebellion. 200 warships jumped to the Krix system, ready to burn their worlds as punishment. The fleet never arrived. A Terran battle group intercepted them in transit. The battle lasted 3 minutes. When it was over, nothing remained of the punitive fleet but scattered debris. A message was broadcast across the Dominion. We are not the saviors of your subject species. We are not their allies. We are simply removing a mutual problem. The Velthari will answer for their crimes. We suggest you do not interfere. The message was all the encouragement the other species needed. The Vorel, an aquatic species whose ocean worlds had been polluted by Velthari mining, declared independence. The Tharn, a silicon-based species who had been treated as little more than machines, joined them. Dozens of smaller species followed. Every time the Velthari sent a fleet to restore order, the Terrans appeared and destroyed it. They never helped the rebels directly. They never provided weapons or supplies. They simply removed the threat and then vanished back into the darkness. The Dominion was being dismantled piece by piece. Keth Voran grew more desperate with each passing day. He ordered all remaining loyal fleets to gather around the capital world. Over 100,000 ships assembled in orbit around Velthoria Prime, the largest concentration of military power in Velthari history. He believed that numbers would save him. If the Terrans wanted to reach him, they would have to fight through that wall of ships. Surely even the Deathworlders could not defeat such a force. But the Terrans had one more weapon to deploy, one that would destroy Keth Voran more completely than any fleet ever could. They released the truth. On every network, on every world, in every language, a data package appeared. It contained the complete historical archives of the Founders, the ancient race that had given the Velthari civilization. These archives had been hidden for millennia, locked away in vaults that only the High Arbiter could access. The archives revealed everything. The Founders had not vanished. They had not ascended to a higher plane. They had not simply left. The truth was far simpler and far more terrible. The Founders had encountered the Terrans. They had seen the Deathworlders as a threat and decided to destroy them before they could spread beyond their homeworld. They had sent their greatest fleet to burn Earth. None of their ships had returned. The Founders had tried again, and again, and again. Each time, they sent larger fleets. Each time, they lost. The Terrans did not just defeat them. The Terrans learned from them. They studied Founder technology and improved upon it. They grew stronger with each attack. In the end, the Founders made one final desperate attempt. They threw everything they had at the Terran homeworld. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier. The Terrans exterminated them. Not just the military, the entire species, every world, every colony, every individual. The Founders were wiped from existence so completely that nothing remained but ruins and warnings. The Forbidden Zone was not a boundary set by the Founders to protect the Velthari. It was a tombstone. Keth Voran watched the archives play on his view screen. He watched the recordings of Founder fleets burning in the void. He watched the final messages from Founder commanders, begging for mercy that never came. He watched the end of a species that had ruled the galaxy before the Velthari even existed, and he understood, finally, what he had done. He had not just threatened the Terrans. He had woken the same nightmare that had destroyed the Founders. He had doomed his entire civilization because he was too proud to heed the warnings of those who came before. Outside his window, the massive fleet continued its vigil. 100,000 ships, waiting for an enemy that had already won. The Terrans were coming. And this time, there would be no mercy. The Terran fleet arrived at Velthoria Prime on a clear morning. 10,000 ships emerged from the void, their dark hulls reflecting the light of the Velthari sun. They took position at the edge of the system and waited. High Arbiter Keth Voran stood on the bridge of his command station, surrounded by his most loyal officers. His fleet of 100,000 ships spread before him like a wall of steel. He should have felt powerful. Instead, he felt nothing but cold dread. The Terrans were outnumbered 10-1. But after everything that had happened, no one in the Velthari fleet believed that would matter. A transmission came through. A human face appeared on every screen in the system. The same calm, cold expression that had haunted Keth Voran's nightmares for weeks. "We offer you one final choice," the human said. "Surrender Keth Voran and the military commanders responsible for the attack on Earth. Accept Terran oversight of all Velthari military assets. Release all subject species from your control. Do this, and your civilization will survive." Diminished, but alive, Keth Voran listened to the offer with his heart's pounding. For a moment, he considered accepting. He could see the faces of his officers, and he knew they wanted him to surrender. They wanted this nightmare to end, but surrender meant death. The Terrans would not let him live after what he had done. And if he was going to die, he would not die begging for mercy. He grabbed the communication console and screamed his response. "I am the High Arbiter of the Velthari Dominion. I bow to no one. If you want me, come and take me. I will burn your fleet from the sky. The human's expression did not change. Very well. The transmission ended. Keth Voran turned to his fleet commanders. All ships, attack formation! Destroy the Terran fleet! The massive armada began to move. 100,000 ships, the largest fleet ever assembled in Velthari history, advanced toward the Terran position. But the Terran ships did not move. They did not raise shields. They did not charge weapons. They simply held position and waited. As the Velthari fleet closed the distance, something strange began to happen. Ships started dropping out of formation. Communication channels filled with confused voices. Weapons that should have been charging went offline. Engines sputtered and died. Keth Voran watched in horror as his armada fell apart. What is happening? Why are we stopping? His tactical officer looked up with terror in his eyes. High Arbiter, our crews are refusing orders. There are mutinies breaking out across the fleet. The subject species crews had made their choice. The Krix engineers, who kept the engines running. The Voral technicians who maintained the weapons. The Tharn pilots who navigated the ships. They had served the Velthari for millennia, but they had no desire to die for a ruler who had led them to destruction. Ships began turning on each other. Captains who wanted to surrender fought against those who wanted to obey the High Arbiter. Officers drew weapons against their own crews. The Great Armada dissolved into chaos, and still, the Terran fleet did not move. They did not need to. They had already won. They had spent months infiltrating the Dominion, planting seeds of rebellion, spreading information, turning the Empire against itself. The fleet that should have protected Keth Voran was now tearing itself apart. In his command station, Keth Voran watched his empire collapse. His guards drew their weapons and pointed them at him. High Arbiter, the guard captain said quietly, the council has voted. You are to be handed over to the Terrans. Your rule is ended. Keth Voran backed away. You cannot do this. I am the High Arbiter. I am the ruler of the Dominion. You are the fool who destroyed it, the captain replied. Keth Voran ran. He fled through the corridors of his command station, past guards who no longer obeyed him, past officers who turned their backs. He made his way to the central control room, where the Dominion's most secret weapon waited, the Stellar Destabilizer. It was an ancient device, built by the founders themselves. It could target a star and cause it to explode, destroying everything in the system. Keth Voran had kept it ready for exactly this moment. If he could not have victory, he would have revenge. He would destroy the Terran fleet. He would kill himself in the process. But he would take his enemies with him. He activated the device and entered the targeting coordinates for Sol, the Terran homestar. His fingers shook as he prepared to fire, but when he pressed the activation button, nothing happened. He pressed it again. Nothing. A message appeared on the screen in front of him, written in perfect Velthari. We found this device 3 months ago. We have made some modifications. The screen changed to show new targeting coordinates. Not Sol, Velthoria's sun, his own star. You wanted to destroy worlds, Keth Voran. Now you will destroy your own. Keth Voran tried to abort the sequence. He entered every code he knew. He screamed at the computer. But the weapon was no longer under his control. A timer appeared on the screen, 10 minutes until activation. On every ship in the system, the same timer appeared. The Terran broadcast cut through every channel. Attention all vessels. The Stellar Destabilizer has been activated. Target: Velthoria's sun. You have 10 minutes to evacuate. We suggest you hurry. Chaos erupted. Ships that had been fighting each other moments ago now fled in every direction. Jump drives activated, faster than light engines engaged. The massive fleet scattered like leaves in a storm. The Terran ships parted smoothly, allowing the Velthari vessels to escape. They had no desire to kill those who fled. Their target had always been Keth Voran, and those like him. In the control room, Keth Voran fell to his knees. Around him, his last loyal servants were running for escape pods. He was alone. He had brought this upon himself. His pride, his ambition, his refusal to heed the warnings that had protected his people for millennia. He had destroyed everything. The stellar destabilizer fired. Velthoria's sun destabilized instantly. The star expanded, consuming the inner planets in seconds. The light reached Velthoria Prime moments later. The capital world, home to billions, was vaporized in an instant. Kethvorin had just enough time to see the light fill the window before he was gone. The Dominion ended that day. In the years that followed, the former subjects of the Velthari built their own civilizations. The Krix formed a trading federation. The Vorel became known as healers and diplomats. The Tharn developed technologies that benefited all species. Even some Velthari survived, those who had fled or surrendered. They lived as refugees, scattered across the galaxy, a reminder of what pride and arrogance could cost. The Terrans did not conquer anyone. They did not build an empire. They simply returned to their space and closed their borders. The Forbidden Zone remained forbidden. A new government arose from the ashes of the Dominion. Their first act was to update the star charts. The region that had once been simply marked Forbidden received a new designation, Terran Space. Do not enter. Do not contact. Do not provoke. The Deathworlders remember everything, and they never forget. Some questioned whether such warnings were necessary. The Terrans had not attacked anyone who had not attacked them first. They seemed content to live in peace, isolated from the rest of the galaxy. But the new leaders understood. They had seen what happened when those warnings were ignored. They had watched an empire that had lasted 12,000 years destroy itself in a matter of months. The warnings would stay. They would be carved into stone. They would be encoded in every computer. They would be taught to every child. Because somewhere in the dark between stars, the Terrans continued their endless watch. Patient, silent, remembering, and in 10,000 years, when memory faded and new empires rose, when new leaders grew ambitious and dismissed the old warnings as superstition, the Terrans would still be there, waiting. They had destroyed the Founders. They had destroyed the Velthari Dominion. They would destroy anyone who threatened their home, because that was what Deathworlders did. They survived. They remembered. They endured. And they never, ever forgave.